In the 4th century AD, the Roman Empire was divided into two virtually independent states, the Eastern Roman Empire, with its capital in Byzantium, and the Western Empire, with its capital in Rome. What was the reason for the division? This video is about that. The 3rd century AD was a difficult century for Rome. The empire was shaken by internecine wars and separatist sentiments in the border provinces. This period went down in history as the crisis of the 3rd century. By the end of the century, Diocletian had succeeded in gathering together the state that had begun to disintegrate, and for almost 100 years the empire was more or less stable. But the tendency towards secession of the eastern part was growing. So, in 330, Constantine the Great, the one who made Christianity the state religion, moved the capital from Rome to Byzantium. This was done to ensure the stability of power, as in Byzantium, he was the sole ruler, away from the intrigues and conspiracies of the palace of Rome. Constantine's descendants divided the empire among themselves and ruled separately the western and eastern parts, although formally the Roman Empire remained a single state. At the same time, from time to time, one or another emperor united both parts of the empire under a single administration. The last emperor who ruled both parts of the empire was Theodosius the Great. After the death of Theodosius, the parts of the empire were ruled by his sons. In the west the youngest was Honorius, and in the east the eldest was Flavius Arcadius. Thus the division of the empire was finalized. But it would be strange to think that the only reason for the division was the desire of each of the heirs to have a part of the empire in management. The reasons were both managerial and socio-economic. Difficulties of governance. The Roman Empire by the 4th century was very large. For example, it took about 40 days for a messenger to travel from the border with Parthia to Rome and 38 days from Londinium. At the same time there was constant turmoil on the borders. With such a slow transmission of information, it was impossible to effectively manage and respond to military threats. Large garrisons had to be held along the entire length of the borders, putting too much power in the hands of the warlords. The division of the empire was a compromise. The two empires were roughly equal in strength and close culturally, so a direct clash was unlikely, while at the same time the emperors could engage in more effective governance on a smaller scale. Economic causes. In addition, the economic gap between East and West was growing. During the 2nd century, the Roman Empire flourished and experienced a tremendous economic boom. This was primarily because the imperial government gave more freedom to the provinces and ended the practice of spontaneous expropriations that had been widespread since the time of Marius and Sulla. The economy was also boosted by a long period of peace. The strongest growth was in the eastern part of the empire, in what is now Greece, Turkey, and the Near East. These lands were highly urbanized and trade flourished in them, helped by the fact that many trade routes passed through them. The West also experienced an economic boom, but to a much lesser extent. The economy of the western part of the empire was for the most part agrarian. The economy in those days was very different from that of today. It was hard to get rich trading large quantities of consumer goods, but it was easy to get rich trading small quantities of luxury goods, silk, jewelry, porcelain, spices, etc. That is why the East grew rich much faster. When hard times came, the crisis of the 3rd century, it was only natural that in the richer East, separatist sentiments arose. Indeed, why should the wealthy East suffer because of palace intrigues in Rome? In an attempt to unify the empire, Diocletian, more warrior than politician, imposed strict centralized control of the economy and an aggressive system of taxation. Unfortunately, his actions only exacerbated the differences between East and West. Diocletian's taxes were the greatest burden on the urbanized and densely populated East, while in the more agrarian western part of the empire farmers found many ways and tricks to avoid taxes. Thus the formal reason for the division of Rome was to solve the problem of governing vast territories, but even if not, this division was probably still inevitable because of the social and economic contradictions between the rich mercantile East and the poor agrarian West.